What's up, champs, and welcome back to another episode of Short Shifts, the twice weekly amuse-bouche, keeping you posted between the million-course meal that is the Keeping Karlsson mega show each and every Sunday night. My name is Ben Burnett, and joining me, as always, my pal and yours, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing this fine evening?
I am doing all right. You know, we here at Short Shifts are going to be reliably bringing you everything you need to be successful at fantasy hockey. Unlike trying to ship something through Canada right now, you can count on us every Wednesday and Friday morning. Let's jump right into it here, Ben. And unfortunately, we got to start with some tough news here. This is close to breaking, but we just saw a knee-on-knee collision between Alexander Barkov and Scott Mayfield. Barkov's knee buckles. He was helped off the ice and straight to the locker room and has not yet made a return. What we have seen so far, it was, unfortunate because we saw kind of the reunification here of a super top line with Huberdeau and Barkov and then Duclair, and they scored right away when the game started, and there was a lot of excitement. This obviously tamps that excitement down a little bit. Huberdeau was joined by Reinhart, Hornquist, and Bennett on the power play afterwards. We're not going to go too deep into this because we don't know the extent of the fallout, but keep your eye on any news. We will certainly update you if there's any fallout for fantasy purposes. If you are following at Game Day News, part of the Game Day suite of Twitter accounts run by super patron Shams, who's just doing an outstanding job, and fellow Red Wings fan too, by the way. You will be kept up to date on all of the news that you may need to get on that, and we will certainly be talking about it Thursday once the picture emerges a little more clearly.
Red Wings fan, is he a Michigan fan as well? Do we know?
I don't know about that. We should probably bug him on it. We have had a few Michigan fans added in on the Discord because I've been seeing my little Block M emoji popping up in a few places. So
I hope not for his sake. Shouts out Shams, a New Brunswicker originally as well, or lived in New Brunswick. Anyway, I think Shams is Team BB, not Team LE for that reason. We need to, because it's the year 2020 of our Lord, talk about COVID-19, unfortunately, once again. This week, of course, the big news is that the Ottawa Senators are off all week because of the COVID outbreak that just will not end in Ottawa. I think the pressing question here, Louis, and actually, Pal Shams asked this in the Short Shifts Discord channel, which is brand new and features a direct line between our listeners and ourselves. Our show run tonight has been influenced by the chat already. Shams wanted to know who we are holding on to out of the Ottawa players. I think for me, obviously, Brady Tkachuk, first-round pick, is staying on my roster. Drake Batherson, who got mentioned on the Keeping Karlsson mega show Sunday, sticking around, point per game so far. Thomas Chabot has been on a cold streak, but he's too good to drop for me. The line that becomes really interesting, though, for me is Josh Norris, who was the most dropped player on Yahoo today, I noticed, Louis. Norris has been okay. He's got about 10 points this season, but he has not been the breakout star that a lot of folks were suggesting, and especially given the fact that his line mate Drake Batherson has been so productive this year. I would definitely cut Tim Stützle or anyone below, including Matt Murray or Philip Gustafsson. Josh Norris, I'm probably holding on to in 14-team leagues. In 10 or 12-team leagues, it probably depends how important my week is. How do you feel about that rundown, Louis?
So I think we should recall that what Norris will do for you, he's not going to hit on the level of a Brady Tkachuk, but he will provide you hits. He will provide you shots. I think if I'm in a categories league or if I'm in a points league that counts enough, puts enough value on shooting and hitting, I think it might be worth hanging in there. Also depends on kind of where you are in the standings. If you're in a position where you need to win now, a week of an empty slot on your roster is not going to be any assist to you there. So I think it's situation dependent. I think it a little bit depends on your scoring. I'm inclined to hold on to him because I like a guy who shoots, and I feel like he should get in on a few more of these Batherson goals that are, taking place. We were talking about that hot streak, but definitely he is, a step below the big three that you mentioned, with Chabot just getting monster minutes and Batherson and Tkachuk. I'm with you on the goalies, and I think anybody else is very much expendable at this point.
And unfortunately, that's not where the COVID news ends today. We have two teams dealing with COVID out COVID-related absences in tonight's game. Lars Eller is missing the action for the Capitals, and Josh Bailey is out for the Islanders. That's all we know at this point, and I'm not going to speculate too deeply, but definitely my ears are peaked a little bit just knowing that we had our first canceled games of the season. I was hoping that we wouldn't see it, and I still remain optimistic that we won't see it to the extent that we did last year, but just keep your eye on those teams. Lewis, where are we going next?
All right, well, we're going to stick with our unfortunate news here. We're going to head over to Montreal and talk about some injuries among les habitants. Hoffman has headed to the IR. He was out for a little while, and now they've got him on IR, so he's going to be out for a little while here. That certainly will be a downgrade to that Montreal power play, and also he was playing on that top line. So that's unfortunate. Jake Allen had a player flung into him by his own defenseman, Jeff Petrie, to really add insult to injury. Petrie also shot a puck off of Charlie Coyle, I think his face, resulting in a goal. So just kind of, as if Petrie wasn't enough of a disaster. And I'm sorry to rub this in, buddy, but this have been some really, just a very humiliating week for Ann Arbor's own Jeff Petrie.
But he didn't score, though.
No, he scored a puck on his own goal.
An own goal.
Coyle's face.
When you said scored a goal, I was like, where's the fantasy points?
Yeah. I should have been much more clear.
I'm desperate out here for those fantasy points.
No, sadly, he will not get an assist for setting up about the easiest, in terms of skill goal that Coyle has ever scored. Obviously, he had to sacrifice to get it past the goalie there.
There's actually a title for that type of goal. It's a Charlie Gargoyle.
Delightful. So Allen was out with a concussion. It's possible he could be back as soon as Saturday. So, Caden Primo was called up. He has, at least as of the time of this recording, 24 saves on 26 shots against the Rangers. It's definitely more interesting than Sam Montembeault, who was just kind of a disaster in his first game filling in for Allen. But obviously keep your ear to the ground here because Allen could be back quite soon. So you're probably only looking at a start or two at the most.
I'd say still a bit of a desperation play just based on the Habs schedule. First of all, they play the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, super heavy games this week. So unless you are in need of goalie starts, you probably can't even fit Caden Primo into your roster. But definitely more interesting than Montembeault, who I basically... I've been avoiding since his rookie year in Florida. We're going to hop right over to St. Louis next, where the most added player in Yahoo, I think this is a litmus test, Lewis, between the Sharks and the Casuals. I'm nervous to say that. I don't mean to call anyone out, but if you are in a league where someone was running to the waiver wire to add Scott Perunovich, you may be playing in a very deep league of fantasy hockey. The most added player, though, and I think that's what's really interesting here, is you have folks who are desperate to get in on something. They need something from their defense, so they go out and add Perunovich, who has tied for the AHL lead in points with 20 in 12 games played. That's pretty impressive for any blue liner. And the Blues have had issues losing Torrey Krug and Justin Falk over the past few weeks. Krug is playing tonight, so there's not a power play one opportunity for Perunovich, which certainly limits his upside. He doesn't do much peripherally. He sounds a lot like the Torrey Krug prototype defenseman that we see a lot of now, which is, an offensive upside guy who does not put in the back end stats. He is practicing on that power play too, and will probably get some offensive opportunities given the pedigree. Why wouldn't you want to put him in a position to chalk up some points? I'd say he is worth a shot in deep leagues if you need some defensive upside, but probably not much more than a streamer in most spots. Speaking of which, I think when I think of this level of player, I think of Logan O'Connor, who we mentioned last week, who's still on line one with Rantanen and Landeskog in Colorado in practice today. Similarly worth a shot in some leagues, but not all. Maybe worth a stream tomorrow if you're looking for somebody to play Wednesday and Fridays. 2 off-night games, not too bad for the Avs. Lewis, I do want to hop back to Perunovich, though. G. Rusky on the KK Discord dropped Noah Dobson after his healthy scratch on Monday. Dobson is back in the lineup tonight, replacing the injured Ryan Pulock, and has an assist already. Would you swap out Noah Dobson for Scott Perunovich, knowing what you do now that Dobson is back and that he's not going to miss more time?
Well, I do think that is a bit of, taking advantage of my 2020 hindsight here, knowing that Dobson is in on the assist. I didn't like the scratch, certainly. And you may be right that it was only the injury that got him back in. It's just been tough sledding, I think, for anyone who held on to these Islanders, not to get kind of distracted from the main point here, but, if you held them through that long week and then came back and then they got shut out in their one game last week and are just getting mauled by the Panthers here tonight, just kind of a grim look for a lot of those players. Getting back to Perunovich, I am very hesitant to make that move sight unseen, especially when... unless I was really desperate for D. When Cale Clegg, for instance, came up and was captaining that first power play for LA, that was someone that I was willing to take a risk on just because, it was power play 1 and I was in bad need of a goalie. Power play 2, this is a guy who might end up the night with 15 minutes of ice time. Is he really going to be able to accomplish a ton from the blue line in that spot? It's a tough call because certainly if you were just going to drop Dobson and, it's worth a shot to pick this guy up and see what he does. But if you were planning on holding him through, I think maybe that could be a bit of a mistake there just because we don't really know what we're getting into or even how long this might last, especially with Krug being back and reasserting himself on the first power play. So good luck to all the Perunovich grabbers. Obviously, one of the most, if not the most added player. But yeah, it wasn't one that I was rushing off to the waiver wire to pick up. I'll be happy to watch and see how he does on someone else's roster.
Lewis, I hate to call you out like this. I do. I hate to call you out, but you are dodging my question like a madman here. Would you drop Noah Dobson for Scott Perunovich is the question.
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Wonderful. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about some streaky players. You're listening to Short Shifts. All right, Lewis, we are back, and I want to give you the floor, my friend. Why don't you start us off with our streaks for the evening?
All right, so I've got a one-player hot streak, and then I've got a several-player cold streak here to discuss. You mentioned Logan O'Connor before the commercial break, and Brian and Elon talked about him on the Sunday Mega Show. A guy who is finding himself with some very nice deployment. Somebody that a lot of folks were hoping would maybe capitalize on that deployment, but has been putting in yeoman's work despite Line 2, Power Play 2 deployment is Nazem Kadri. He's put up 10 points in the last 6 games, including 16 shots. He's still only rostered in 42% of leagues. Maybe it's because the Avs have had pretty weak scheduling up to this point. For the last few weeks, they are in week 3 of 3 straight weeks of only 2 games per week. They have a glorious schedule next week, 4 games, including a Monday, Wednesday, Friday set before going back to back Friday, Saturday. So if you can afford just the 2 remaining games this week on Wednesday, Friday, I would definitely consider adding this red hot center.
So when you say you would consider adding the red hot center, Lewis, you're talking about in all formats. You'd get him in, in a shallow league, or are you going to be dropping Josh Norris for Nazem Kadri?
Ooh, I actually like that quite a bit. I think that I would. So you get 2 games out of Kadri this week for no games for Josh Norris. I just really like that he's doing what he's doing with not great deployment. And if he ever gets onto that top power play, I feel like it could be really nice. So yeah, I think I would drop Norris for Kadri if he was available.
You mentioned how well he's doing given his deployment. And I guess when I see a player like Nazem Kadri hit a hot streak like this, where there's no uptick in deployment and he's 31 at this point, we see no reason really to think that he's going to take a massive career step forward. He's pacing for 96 points on the season or whatever. Are you thinking that he's taking a season-long step forward, or is this straight up just pure hot streak?
Well, I'm actually sort of thinking schedule-wise here because I've got a Wednesday, Friday game. I know I'm going to be able to get him in both, and that leaves me free to stream him out if I would like for Saturday, Sunday, including potentially picking up Josh Norris, getting him right back if nobody wants to jump on him, while he's dropped. So I think just sort of considering it from a schedule standpoint, yeah, he is probably overachieving. I don't see him as a 90-point guy, but it's not like his line mates are chopped liver on the second line in Colorado. The top six is pretty formidable.
Right, but I mean, he's been a 45, 50-point guy for several years with similarly deployed. That's all I guess that's the reason I ask. Not to talk crap on the second line in Colorado.
I totally understand what you're saying, but we're also looking at swapping him for someone who we know isn't going to play at all this week and who may be available to be grabbed back over the weekend. I think that's a risk I'm willing to take. If I don't get Josh Norris back, I won't be too sad as long as I'm seeing Kadri, put up 2/3 of what he's doing right now. Worst case scenario, I've got another streaming spot up there that I'll be looking for, listening to the Keeping Karlsson podcast network to find that next great player.
I would agree with you there, yeah. I definitely am interested in Kadri in the short term. I guess I'm just wanting to hedge expectations because I don't see him being like a 90-point player as his current streak is showing.
I think it's always good to clarify, that we're not expecting him to continue at his current pace, but still can see him as a valuable piece. All right, we're going to head over to Vancouver next. Sorry, Terry, who was talking about this in the Short Shifts Discord. I will try and be, as I explained, quick and merciful like an executioner as we talk about the malaise that is plaguing this team right now. We've had a little bit of, a downswing for Thatcher Demko, allowing 6 and 7 goals in his last 2 outings. Very rough, obviously. The top line is not what we hoped it would be. So I thought it might be worth digging down a little bit and figuring out what's going on here and if there's some value to be had. One thing that I noticed was that the Canucks were getting the 6th fewest high danger chances for and enduring the 7th most high danger chances against. That is not a good combo. As a result, they have the 4th worst high danger chances for % in the league in terms of the percentage of high danger chances that are going in favor of their team. Luckily, the goalies, mostly Demko, are keeping the Nucks in these games. Vancouver has the 2nd highest overall high danger save percentage at .888. You mentioned too that those high danger chances are, potentially more repeatable, that save percentage, than some of these other goalie stats. So that's good news about Demko. That seems to suggest he's really good. And I know Elon mentioned him as a potential buy low candidate, and I can see it in a keeper or a dynasty. But I am a little bit worried about the Canucks season kind of possibly just going off the rails a bit here as they underachieve and potentially fall out of playoff contention. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Adam K, patron, who also does the Cupful newsletter. He correctly guessed which team I was talking about based only on those high danger save percentage and chances for percentage stats. So well done there. Keep up the great work on the newsletter. It's really fun. Moving along to look at those forwards, though. The offense in Vancouver has been a huge disappointment. Pettersson and Besser especially are on pace for 46 and 41 points respectively. Drilling into their numbers a little bit, Besser's shot rate is fine. He's enduring a real slump in production thanks in large part to 6% personal even strength shooting percentage and 2.7% even strength on ice shooting percentages. One thing he does have going for him right now, though, is he's been in on 100% of the goals that have been scored while he's on the ice. So while we may see some increased goals as that shooting percentage normalizes a little bit, it may come with some reduced assists as that participation falls. Pettersson, meanwhile, hasn't managed an even strength goal yet and is seeing his assists per 60 rate drop to 1/3 of what he accomplished last year. His points participation is pretty low at 40%, so he may be in for some improved assist numbers. And while this team is shooting below average at 5.2% at even strength while he's on the ice, that's double what Besser is seeing. And finally, the pair are getting almost 80% of their starts in the offensive zone. I don't think their minutes can be any more sheltered than they already are. I think both of these players are going to see some positive regression and could be buy low candidates, but I'm penciling them in right now for more of a 65-ish point pace, rather than for 65-ish points, rather than the much loftier numbers we hope to see.
So you're probably not even buying them low then, at that level?
Well, yeah. I mean, you'd have to be finding someone who is pretty desperate. They say, when your opponent is drowning, throw them an anvil. So I would be only offering them, something that is, a 60-ish point player and hope that they are just, they think that this 40-point pace is maybe the new normal.
So 65-point pace for Besser is like almost around average for him. Are you thinking that there's a 65 point pace for Pettersson, but even worse for Besser? Or do you think that they're both kind of like that? That to me suggests that we're seeing Besser bounce back and Pettersson bounce back a bit, but not to his same level. Or do you see them both underachieving their usuals?
I guess that 65 is a little more aimed at Pettersson here. I just gave him, a similar one so that I wasn't, trying to split hairs too much on the pod. But, I think that Besser may be on the lower side of that, closer to 60. It all just sort of depends on how these numbers break, right? I don't feel super confident about how they're going to go, except that Pettersson will probably participate in a few more goals than he's been getting in on, and Besser probably a few fewer.
All right, Lewis, we have just 2 more shifts to skate tonight. We're going to jump back over to St. Louis for a quick second. I need to talk about smooth Rob Thomas and the incredible streak that he's on. 7 assists in his last 3. That's not counting tonight's game against the Yotes. 1 goal and 14 assists now in 14 games played to give him an above point per game pace 14 games into the year. The Blues have been running this really even top 9, all lines scoring really decently. I know your boy Jordan Kyrou scored on a feed from my Pavel Buchnevich tonight. Thomas's average time on ice, though, is way up at 5.5 minutes higher than it was last year. The issue, though, remains the kid never shoots. 1.1 shots per game is what we're seeing out of Robert Thomas. I think he's somebody with, while he's on the hot streak, similar to Kadri, as you mentioned, worth having around. And I'm not holding on to a long leash, and I'm probably not targeting him in bangers leagues or anything like that. A very one-dimensional fantasy asset, despite the fact that he's got this very exciting start to the season points-wise.
Yeah, he's kind of got some of this big Jakub Voracek energy right now. Like, he'll give you assists and maybe not a whole lot else. I did pick him up for a stream, but the player I dropped was Oliver Wahlstrom, who played like single-digit minutes in his last game, and the coach is clearly pissed at him. So, didn't sacrifice a whole lot to get him in. And like you said, short leash. I would be happy to move on from him if he is not seeing much production.
Yes, I read Andrew Gross, Islanders beat writer, who said basically that if Casey Cizikas was healthy yesterday, Wahlstrom probably doesn't even play. So he's clearly in the doghouse, but the Islanders do have some injuries. Wahlstrom moved up the lineup to the third line tonight ahead of the Islanders getting absolutely destroyed by the Panthers. Lewis, why don't you give us our last player tonight? All
right. Well, this is someone I would certainly rather have than Robert Thomas, and someone who I've been itching to get on the show for a while now, and that is Jesper Bratt. He is simply on fire and feeling confident playing on the Devils' second line with Dawson Mercer at center. He recently said he thinks his line can be the first line night in and night out. And with 11 points in the last 9 games and 26 shots in that time, it's hard to argue. His ice time has been a bit all over the place. He played nearly 18.5 minutes against the Rangers on Sunday, but only 14 on Saturday and 12.5 the 2 previous games. But he's been as high as 22. So as long as he's staying productive, I suppose I'm not going to be too concerned about that ice time flying around. He's on line 2 with Mercer, which, like line 1B maybe. And he's on that top power play too. So he's really developing some chemistry with the young rookie with amazing flow in Dawson Mercer. So those are a couple players that I might take a look at. But if I were picking one or the other, Bratt is the guy to grab.
I agree with you there. Yeah, I would take Bratt. I would probably take Bratt over Kadri as well, because I have a feeling that if he does pan out, he might be a bit more of a full season stream, though I'm probably sticking with Kadri for this week only because the scheduling is so disgusting and New Jersey plays only 2 games, Thursday and Saturday.
Right, they lost their Tuesday game thanks to this COVID outbreak here. So we are back to talking about COVID. I feel like I have time warped back to last year. Hopefully we don't have nearly as much of this, because that was not a ton of fun. But you know what was a ton of fun, Ben, was getting together and having the opportunity to talk hockey with you like we do twice a week. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. Brian and Elon are at Keeping Carlson. Dave Benton of The Stream Stream Scheme is at NHL Stream Scheme. If you really enjoy the show, please take the time and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We love that. It helps get our podcast in front of more eyeballs and into more ears. And also, please visit the great sites where we research our episodes: Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural, Stat Trick, and Cupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.